Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse,
I'm Doug.
and this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
And welcome back to Boring Conversation, everybody. Doug from the Danger Planet is here with me today. We're recording, honestly, kind of a spur of the moment episode. We just started talking about this, last night, Doug?
Well, you were helping me with a bunch of the logistics stuff for the TO team, and I was like, we should probably maybe make an episode about this because you messaged me with
Yeah.
like a bunch of stuff we were working on together as the TO team. So
Truth. So, yeah, I'm Jesse. That's
I'm
Doug. He's from Danger Planet.
it's true.
And we're talking about tournament prep today. So Brandon and I actually, Brandon from Danger Planet, of course, recorded an episode sort of along these lines while we were getting ready to go to the Nova Open last year, as I recall. And we did a pretty in-depth deep dive on pools, pool analysis, how to pick what models you're going to be taking for your bag. If you're interested in seeing like a really granular, high-level version of that segment of tournament prep, I'd invite you to go back and give it a listen. I think it's an episode that came out pretty well, and it was actually one of the very few episodes that we had a video component for. So if you watch it on YouTube, you'll be able to see us fiddle with a spreadsheet. How exciting! Super good content.
Spreadsheets are the best. Everyone
Spreadsheets
loves
are the
them.
best, because why use like a tier list generator and put little pictures of all the models on there when we could just use a spreadsheet, right?
Because why
Right.
escape spreadsheets from your fun project from your actual daytime job? You know, everybody wants
Yeah.
more of those in their life, obviously.
Yeah, I live, breathe, and die in those
Yeah,
pretty
me
much
too.
every day. So
Yeah,
yeah,
me too.
just kind of put you guys all through a little bit of that pain.
Lol.
So before we get into the kind of discussion of the day, which like I said is really going to be around kind of a holistic view of how you get ready for a tournament, specifically a multi-day tournament. Doug, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what we've been working on and kind of your baby, which is going to be coming to fruition really in just like a month and a half at this point?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's coming up in less than 2 months now. I was talking to a couple people about it last night, and I was like, "Oh, it's in like 6.5 weeks is our GT." It's the GT, yay! That we're all working on together. So the TO team for this GT is actually Jesse from Boring Conversation, Jim Dyson, the Dice Man 87 himself, Brandon Lane, and then Rich from our Discord as well. But the event is a 5-day Malifaux GT hosted in Boston, Massachusetts. It's on July 19th, 20th, and 21st. The games itself are happening on the 20th and the 21st, and it's in a hotel right in the Boston Logan Airport Peninsula. Um, I won't spend too much crazy time going over all the granular details because we actually have a video that just goes over everything. So Jesse can link that in the bottom if
Mm-hmm.
folks are interested in registration details, what the round events are, a lot of the different indie games that we'll be showcasing for demos, stuff like that we cover in that. So I don't want to take too much time doing this, but the high level is it's going to be an awesome 5-round Malifaux GT. It's pretty competitive. There'll be $1,000 for first place, cascading down for second and third. There'll be cash prize money for best painted and a bunch of other fun stuff we're doing. And that's about it. Yeah, it's the 19th, 20th, and 21st of next month in Boston. Boom.
Yeah, it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun.
We have 27 people registered right now of the max allowable 50. We have a hard cap at 50. So I think our whole team is hoping maybe we can get to like 35, 40 people. That'd be really cool to have that amount. So if you haven't signed up and you're considering it, you should consider it more.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun. And, just I know some people, it's inevitable somebody's going to get weirded out about, playing for money. Because you hear stories about people going to like cash prize war machine tournaments and magic events that people can get, a little beardy for. I think that we all know at this point that the Malifaux community is pretty awesome. I think in all of the years that I've been playing and all of the events that I've gone to, I've seen maybe like one or two incidents of like, poor sportsmanship or people having kind of a bad time. It very, very, very rarely happens, even in gigantic events that people are paying a ton of money to travel to and spending time away from, family, friends, to travel across the country to Boston or Houston or Vegas or wherever it is that they're being held. So I think that if anybody is nervous about the fact that there is a big cash prize, just know that, the community is going to take care of us. We're all great sports. We're all great players. And just because there's some money on the line, shouldn't scare you off. Come flip some cards, have some fun.
We also have we're giving away $300 to the top 3 best sportsmen as well to encourage everybody to be good sportsmen. And also part of what Jesse talked about is the reason why we have a 4-person TO team. We really want to make sure that if people have questions for judges or they feel like something might not be going exactly, in a copacetic way, that they can feel comfortable calling for a judge, and there'll be a judge at their table in like, under 2 minutes or something. That was really important to us. So that's why we have Jesse and Jim and Rich and Brandon all on staff, 4 tournament judges for what is now about a 30-person tournament. We'll give you good coverage on those types of scenarios if they arise.
Yeah. And a lot of times you don't see registrations really fill out until just a couple of weeks before the event. So with all the publicity around this and the central location, the good time of year to travel there, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we end up at 45 plus people, which would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I'm just looking forward to it regardless. It's going to be a fun weekend, I think.
It's going to be great. Like I get to go and like do judging stuff, but not actually have to run the event. I can like hang out and like paint models or whatever. It's going to be,
so much more relaxing from what you're used to.
So much more relaxing than running Captain Con. Yeah.
Instead of having every responsibility all at the same time, you only have like a fifth of what your normal responsibilities are.
Yeah. It's going to be great. So obviously that is probably the biggest thing that you've got going right now. Of course, everybody should certainly check out the Danger Planet YouTube channel and join them on social media. Aside from the GT and Danger Planet, was there anything else that you wanted to plug or mention?
I'm slowly training my dog to be more sociable at the dog park, and we're working towards that as a team. Talk the Dog is making great progress.
Awesome.
That's the other big important thing that's happening in my life right now.
Cool. For me, not a ton going on. Got a lot of stuff that's going to be keeping me around the house for the next probably like month or so. But I did manage to get out and get a couple of games in at some local tournaments. I went to Chase's tournament in Central Connecticut a couple of weeks ago. So it was a really cool event, all centered around the global campaign, the Echoes of the Breach. I got in 3 games, all in support of the Tri-Chi, which is the only correct choice. Tri-Chi Nia is the greatest Nia, and anybody else that disagrees is wrong.
My favorite part of that Nia is the little gremlin in the cargo shorts, and he's like pulling the beer cooler. That's really why I want that Nia to come to life.
Yeah. So at this point, as of date of recording, 6-2, the global campaign has wrapped, so you can't get any games in for it anymore. I am really looking forward to seeing who came out on top, and I'm really, really, really hoping that it's going to be Tri-Chi. But I did end up winning that event, scored all my objectives for the global campaign in each of my games, which was fantastic. So contributed quite a few points to the cause there. I also have been kind of dabbling in another miniatures game recently, which is not something that I've done in a long, long time, aside from sort of some passive. Yeah, I know, right? Aside from some kind of passive interest in BattleTech. I've been playing that with my son a little bit, but in terms of a new minis game, I haven't really bought into one in many, many, many years. And I just kind of took the dive and spent the money that I had been budgeting for a resin printer into instead buying into Song of Ice and Fire, the army scale minis game by Cool Mini or Not.
I think it's one of the.
It's pretty dope.
I think it's one of the best rank and flank games I've ever played. I think it might be the best rank and flank game I've ever played. Honestly,
yeah, it's right up there. I mean, it's a cool game. It's very tactically deep. It actually, honestly, I think the reason I like it so much is that it honestly just kind of plays like army scale Malifaux in many ways. Alternating activations. You've got a lot of variability with like the tactics cards that you can play to affect the game. There is a lot of dice rolling and re-rolls, but it's not like you're rolling 100 dice at a time. I mean, I think the most dice that you'll pretty much ever will roll is 10. So it's not like you have a giant brick of dice that you have to sort through 96 attacks with. Yeah, pretty cool game, and
They
it plays
also
pretty
have
quick.
the politics board in relation
Yep,
to the actual game state board, and
yep,
juggling the placement of the politics, like the politique pieces versus like what's
yeah,
actually happening in the game state, is really cool, like mechanic that I've never
yeah.
seen before, really, and many other games like that. So
Yeah, being able to just kind of identify the quote unquote correct time to activate a model, be it a non-combat unit for the politics board or a combat unit on the table, is one of the things that I really like quite a lot about it. I don't think that it'll ever take the place of Malifaux, because it's just not quite as
yeah,
brain bendy and deep. But in terms of just other games, it's good to have one that has quick play times and minimal setup. I mean, the game is played with 2D terrain that comes in the box, and like it takes all of maybe 5 minutes to get a game set up, which is
yeah.
pretty cool. So good stuff. I've been guest hosting recently on my friend Mike and John's podcast called Chip Grooves Radio. I am a lifelong nerd and a lifelong appreciator of music, and the thing that kind of is the vergence between those two things is video game soundtracks. So the podcast is strictly, reviewing, listening to snippets of, and discussing video game soundtracks that maybe we've played through, maybe we haven't. But I get very passionate about that kind of thing.
You guys should do
We
the
actually
Castlevania Symphony of the Night soundtrack.
they did Castlevania Lords of Shadow pretty recently, but
Nice.
Symphony of the Night is definitely on my list of games that I told them I'd love to talk about.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be having me on a little bit more often moving forward, just because the chemistry is pretty good. I'm going to make sure that I post a link in the show notes, and I've also been putting links in the I think in the video games channel on the Boring Conversation Discord. We actually just today, the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild episode went up, which I think went very, very well. We also covered Doom 2016 together, and I did Chrono Trigger with them a little while ago, and the first one I did with them was Bastion, which is a
Chrono
fantastic
Trigger
little
is
indie
dope.
game.
I
Chrono
really
Trigger
like
is
the
dope.
soundtrack on Chrono Trigger a lot,
Arguably the best video game soundtrack of all time. So,
and some of the
needless
best
to
video
say, we
game
had a
art.
lot of good things to say about that. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I have going on. But first, before we get into the rest of the episode, what, Doug, are you drinking today?
I'm drinking Monster Energy Juice Pacific Punch. There's can't be anything natural in this. Yeah, there sure isn't. Yeah, that's what I'm drinking.
It says juice, though.
It says juice. It's got to be good for you, right?
Juice. Yeah.
It's not. It's not.
Yeah. I'm trying out a new beer today. I have Progression Brewing Noon Juice New England Session IPA. It's only 3.9% ABV. It drinks more like a 5.5 or 6%, so they did a great job making sure that the body stayed up there. And this is from Northampton, Massachusetts. I've never been to this brewery, but I would definitely like to check it out. It is pretty tasty. All right, so tournament prep. How do you prep for a major tournament that you're going to be traveling to, or even one that's going to be local? Well, I think there's kind of a lot that goes into it. And I think really the first thing that you have to consider when you're packing your bags or deciding how you're going to approach the event is going to be, what's your objective? Now, the objective isn't necessarily going to be to win the tournament. I know that, for instance, I just played in a Song of Ice and Fire tournament about a week ago, something like that. I had only played 3 games before I got there. I had no intention whatsoever of winning or even placing in the event. I just wanted to get some games against different play styles, different factions, and get a better handle for the faction that I chose. I made sure to only bring models or units that I had a good bit of practice with, either through mental gymnastics or actual playtime on the table, so that I wasn't wasting my opponent's time. You could be going just to get some reps. You could be going to try out a new keyword. You could just be going to have some fun and talk to friends, or you could be going to try and win it all. Doug, what kind of objectives do you kind of consider when prepping for a major event like this?
I think the most important one is the one that you just said, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I'm a big fan of whatever I'm doing or whatever like endeavor I'm undertaking is give myself context, give myself a frame of reference for what I'm actually trying to achieve on that given day. And I think you did a great job of kind of basically just mirroring my mindset for that first part. I guess one of the other things that I always focus on and start with when I'm starting to prepare for a major tournament, and in my mind, a major tournament is usually like a 2-day event most of the time, usually like 5 rounds. And if it's not that, it's like a 3-round event at like Nova or Captain Con or
Sure.
something like that, right? Something not like a 3-round at an LGS or something, right? So
Mhm.
this is when I'm talking about these types of things, that's kind of where my brain is at. Um, and I guess the first thing that I always do is I look at the event and I try to pick a very small handful of masters that I'm going to bring to that event. So I own all of Malifaux except for 5 keywords at this point. Um, like literally all like I'm only missing 5 keywords. And they're all painted, they're all built. Um, and even with that, when I go to a tournament or an event, I only ever bring 3 keywords with me, and I bring the versatiles to support those keywords. That's it. That's all I bring. And leading up to that event, I practice a bunch with those 3 keywords. I see what I like in what different pools, and I plan around just those 3 keywords. It helps me scale down the information overload that sometimes Malifaux can present to you, and it lets me plan around those 3 as kind of a mini ecosystem for what I'm planning on bringing on the day. And I think that's probably like my first big checkbox in my brain, for events.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know that when I'm going to an event, very rarely am I going with the intention of podiuming. But it's just not really my style. Like I'd love to win in a tournament. Usually what ends up happening with me is, I might sneak into podium, second or third place. I haven't really taken top spot in very many major events that I've gone to. But my goal is usually in a large event is I want to finish in the top 10. As long as I'm in the top 10, I'm usually pretty happy. More often than not, I end up more like in the top 5, which is great. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll plan I'll put together my game plan to support that. And it's very much like what you just talked about, picking a couple of keywords, not bringing my entire collection, sticking to stuff that I have a lot of experience with. Because one thing that I do think is very important, especially if you are somebody who's playing on mid to top tables, is not to say that you shouldn't try new stuff at an event, but like trying something that's brand spanking new to you and is complex, like some Malifaux crews can tend to be. You have to be respectful not only of your own time but of your opponents. So I've never played Shenlong. I'm really looking at learning Shenlong right now. I would not take Shenlong to a GT, like a 5-round event, and say that I'm just going to solo him to try and figure him out. Way too complicated. There's some crews that you can get away with that with. But I wouldn't want to do that to myself or my opponents because I feel like it would just end up frustrating people. So that a lot of times what I'm going to do is I'm going to structure my objective around hitting that top 10, preferably the top 5, and then deciding whether or not I'm going to shoot for any kind of like achievement awards or bonus objectives that the event has in place, such as like an Iron Scorpius, a Golden Scorpius. You know, if you go to an achievement, I've seen some tournaments set up like an achievement league where you can actually get additional points for like a secondary prize, like best general, if you achieve these specific objectives throughout the course of the tournament. Those are the kind of things that are very appealing to me. Even if it's going to mean that I have a more difficult time winning the game, I really like trying to stretch myself and go for some of those extra little prizes. So anytime you go to an event that's going to have something like that, I'm automatically going to gravitate towards it.
I don't think you're the only type of player that does that. When I first came into competitive Malifaux from basically competitive Magic the Gathering, I was shocked at how many players share that mindset. Like people hunting the Scorpius is a thing. People hunting like achievements and stuff during serious in-game tournaments is also a thing. It's cool to see because
Yeah,
it's
because
not
like
necessarily the case in every game system.
yeah, like ultimately, I think that the way that Malifaux plays, being a very player driven and player skill driven game, means that it's not like you can just try and spend the most money on the fanciest deck or the craziest net list that you found that's only going to be good for another 2 months before it gets eroded by the game designers.
You
Means
literally
that
almost said
like
Games Workshop.
I almost. It's certainly not the only game that's happened in. There are many others, but that is a kind of the prime example.
Lol.
So you know, there's a lot less of that in Malifaux, and I think that because the game is so player skill driven, if you play the same crew, like if you just have a crew that you play, and you play it a lot, 15, 20 games, you barely sub models in or out, or if you do, it's just maybe like a tech piece here and there. At a certain point, the game becomes kind of formulaic. And the only time that it really is a tough game is if you're playing into somebody who hasn't dealt with it before. Then it turns into a real game. But a lot of the other time, a lot of the rest of the time, it's just a matter of you saying, okay, I've got these cards. These are the things that I can do. I'm going to hit my marks and going to do what my crew does. And to me, that's kind of boring. Like, it's just not. Like, I could do that. I could just say, I'm going to play Mawtucket at all 6 rounds of this event, and I'm going to win probably all of my games because I've got like freaking 80 games in with her at this point. And I kind of did that a little bit on the second half of the Nova Open last time, where I was messing around with trying a couple of different masters. I'm like, I'm going to play Zip this game. I'm going to play Ophelia this game. And then I realized that, like, given the competition that was at the event, I probably should be playing my best game, and I just stuck with Ma the rest of the time. But I did swap in and out a lot of models. Like, you can certainly do that, but I think that adding some variety and adding some other goals and objectives appeals to players in Malifaux a little more than others, because there's so, like I said, I'm kind of like rambling a little bit, but because there's so much player agency, it also gives you an opportunity to go for some of those other things without necessarily shattering your chances of winning the game. You're not going to completely screw yourself if you just try and go for them.
I think the big thing to highlight there is just people talk about it all the time in Malifaux, but it really is a true defining characteristic of this game system. The massive amount of player agency afforded to the player, and thusly the skill that they're able to leverage in game versus a lot of other game systems out there. It's just not even really comparable a lot of the time. Like, the core hardcore randomizing elements in this game are the red Joker and the black Joker, and that's 2 out of 54 cards.
Yeah.
Right? Like, other than that, the player has agency via their control hand, effectively. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, when Iron Scorpius first got sort of injected into the game back in 2nd edition, if anybody got an Iron Scorpius award, it was very, very rare for them to actually win the tournament, or sometimes even come in like podium at all. Oftentimes it would be somebody that was down in like the 4th to 10th place that would end up getting it. A lot of that was an artifact of 2nd edition Malifaux, where like there were the haves and the have-nots in terms of masters and crews. So when you had to play your have-nots, you were going to have a much more difficult time winning, and it was really just a matter of trying to push for as much differential as possible to narrow that gap. In 3rd edition, especially the last couple of major events that I've gone to, oftentimes the person who gets Scorpius is also potentially even in first place,
first or second place,
or in second place very frequently.
I've seen that a lot.
So that's been a big shift, and I think that speaks to the balance level of the game, and also obviously the amount of time that a lot of players have to dedicate to learning all of these new masters, or just having a strong core grasp on the workings of the game in the first place, so that they can pick up a master with minimal experience and still be successful.
I think it points to also a much more balanced, cohesive game state for M3 versus M2. Whereas, so I never played M2, but oh boy, have I heard a lot of fireside stories from Sam Barrows about it. Everything about M2 strikes me like it was Super Friends team up for XYZ combo. I've got my combo. What does your combo do? And that type of environment isn't very good for somebody that's looking to go and bring all keywords. And then in M3, what I've seen is, there are some keywords that are obviously more powerful or less powerful, and there's a range and variance there. But that tethered range is much smaller than what all-star list X versus all-star list Y would have been, comparing M2 to M3, basically, in my mind.
Yep. And I think that probably what I'm going to end up doing at next year's Captain Con is, in lieu of an Iron Scorpius award, which I've been doing for several years, I'm actually going to transition it over to a Golden Scorpius award, which, for anybody who's not familiar with that, basically the idea is that you are not allowed to hire any single model greater than its rare limit throughout the course of the entire event. So like if you take an enforcer, you can only ever take that one enforcer one time in all of the 5 rounds of the event.
That's super
So it
spicy.
really forces you to kind of stretch. Now there's a lot of record keeping involved on your part. And I mean, realistically speaking, if you're what it really does is it further encourages more in keyword play. And it makes it a major decision on when you're going to bring in one of those big out of keywords. Like you can't just play Rezzers and then take Manos every round because you're only allowed to take Manos once for the entire event. Like I don't want to beat on Manos, but I mean, like that's a good prime example of having to kind of stretch your legs and figure out other ways within your own keywords to solve the problems presented at each table. So that's my plan. But those are the type of things that are going to significantly impact your prep going into an event, and obviously in how you pack your bags as well. Kind of, going the next step while you're doing your bag packing, while you're figuring out which keywords you're going to take. The first thing you really need to look at, aside from whether you're going to try for one of those major rewards, is pool analysis, taking a look at the strategies, schemes, and deployments that are going to be present at the event. Most of the time for a major event, those are going to be released a good bit ahead of time, at least a couple of weeks. So that gives you a chance to look things over. Doug, what kind of things do you take into account when you're doing pool analysis? Like if you were to look at the Danger Planet GT's posted pools right now, what would be your initial thoughts on how you would kind of pack your bags?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a really good question, right? I always look at primary strat and deployment first, right? So what's the strategy? What's the overall primary strategy? Can the master that I'm taking for this round do that strategy either well or reasonably well? And does the deployment kind of most of the time what I look for is the deployment making this master not playable? And the biggest example of that I could like give, for example, would be there's a lot of masters in this game that don't love corner deployment.
Yeah.
There are some masters in this game that fucking love corner deployment. And that is very much a story of have and have not in terms of whether or not a crew is going to be able to efficiently unpack from a corner deployment. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest example of something that my brain keys in on immediately when I look at a pool is what's the deployment, what's the strat, and is the master that I've picked going to be able to do these two things without overextending or having it be more difficult than it should be? And if that's the case, then I should probably be looking at one of my other masters. And again, I'll go into a tournament like this having earmarked and practiced with 3 masters. Usually I try to make them complement one another. So I try to give myself at least one master that has good mobility. I try to give myself at least one master that has really good DPS. And then usually the third pick is a master that can complement or cover the blind sides of master 1 and 2. And that's usually like, at least initially when I'm looking at pools, that's how my brain is looking at these, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, like if we'll just assume for the sake of argument that my intention in preparing for going to this tournament, which I'm not playing in, but if I were, would be to win. I want to take first place, or I want to make sure that I'm on the podium. A lot of times, the first thing I'll do when I look at a set of pools is I'll look at round 1 and round 4. I feel like round 1 and round 4 are the 2 most important rounds of a 5-round event in terms of accomplishing that objective, podiuming or winning. Reason I say that is round 1, you never really know what you're going to get. You could end up getting paired into the person that ends up winning the event, or you could end up getting paired into a brand new player. You never really know.
Yeah, your
So
pair is
you
totally
need
random.
Yeah, it's totally random. So you need to have a master that can accomplish that pool, that you don't mind. Like, let's say you're going for a Scorpius award and you pair into a tough player that you don't mind burning on round 1. Or you just have to be prepared to have a really strong game. A lot of times you're kind of shaking the rust off. Everybody's getting settled in. You might not necessarily be playing your best game, but you need to be prepared to, in my eyes. round 4 I think is super important because, I mean, quite frankly, a lot of times people stay up very late on after round 3. So things can be a little foggy. A lot of times I want a master that is powerful and I can kind of play sort of on autopilot available for round 4. So, if I were to look at the Danger Planet GT, I say, okay, round 4, wedge deployment, cloak and dagger, some schemes in there we don't need to get into right now. But most importantly, I see that in your faces in the pool. I'm like, okay, this is going to be kind of a nasty, punchy game. This is probably the round that I want to consider dropping like a Ma Tucket or, potentially even like an Ophelia, something that I'm going to be able to really, really take my opponent out at the knees with. And that I'm very comfortable running, that I won't be likely to make mistakes, even though I'm going to be probably a little sleep deprived. And then if I have a good game round 1, I'm probably going to have good games round 2 and round 3. By the time you get to round 4, you're really going to be through most of the pairings to the point that you're matched up against a very skilled player. And then if you have a good game round 4, then it leads into round 5, and you just take whatever is most appropriate for that round. But for me, like I said, round 1 and round 4 are the most important ones to prepare for exactly those reasons.
Or if you're like me, Jesse just texts you the morning of, and he's like, "Hey, bud, you coming to round 4?" And you're like, "No, I'm too hungover and stayed out till 3 a.m. singing karaoke."
Right.
Which that
Exactly.
exact text message chain has happened between the two of us at least 4 times now. I would say.
Yep. And then you show up at like 10 a.m. feeling, looking fresh as the day
Quote
you were born.
unquote fresh as
Like,
the day we're born, quote unquote.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. The rallying ability is really something to behold. It's impressive. So in terms of looking at the pools, those are the ones that, I think are the most important. And they're going to inform the way that I pack my bag. When I'm going to a big event, I usually try to take 4 masters. I like to have 3 core and 1 flex. And then I like to have the various, out of keyword and versatile options that support those masters. A lot of times, if I still have space in my bag, I might bring another one just to kind of fill things up. And a lot of times it's going to be just a fun master. So like if I go to a heavy hitting event and I'm getting absolutely smashed round 1 and round 2, at that point, like I am not in the running for winning, and it's going to be a struggle for me to end up in top 5 or top 10. So at that point, I might bring out something that's just a little bit more fun. Maybe I'm fairly experienced with, but I want to try out and just have a good time. So that's when I'll break out something like a Ulix or like a Brewmaster, something that I really, really, really love, but just don't quite have the reps in to be super competitive with, and just have some fun. Because there's nothing like, I don't really get a lot out of going to an event and getting, stomped the first couple of rounds, knowing that I can't win, and then still kind of bringing my absolute best game for the subsequent rounds. Like, that's just not as fun for me. I use it as an opportunity to try some fun stuff against a variety of different players of varying skill levels and just have a good time.
I do that also. Like when I was on Rezzers for a good part of last year / the early part of this year, I wanted to get in more reps on Molly specifically. And
Mhm.
so I had like 1 or 2 events where my round 1 and my round 2 didn't go as good as I wanted it to go. So then
Mhm.
in rounds like 3 and 4, I actually played a bunch of Molly, and I was able to get in games against varying play level skill of opponent in lots of different pools. And like it was a form of getting value for myself, exactly how like you described. Like, all right, round 1 didn't go great. I'm probably not really in the running much if it's a 3-round event, or if it's a 5-round event, round 1 and 2 didn't go amazing. All right, I will still want to get some value out of this experience. Let me kind of like field test this master, Um, and I definitely did
Yeah.
that specifically with Molly, specifically in Rezzers
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, aside from actually preparing the bags with, your models that you're going to bring, the crews that you're going to select, doing all the pool analysis, which is not really the objective of this episode. Although I'm certain there's going to be a lot of pool analysis discussion in the various discords leading up to this event, and I'd encourage everybody to take part in those discussions. One of the things that I really enjoy a lot of going to these major events is the like kind of the after hours or the off time activities. So I actually think that packing for those and preparing for them is a really important part of what makes these events very special for me. So that's going to be, anything from board games to, last time when we were at Captain Con, a bunch of us cracked out a bunch of like, Commander pre-constructed decks. And that was the first time that I had, flipped Magic cards in years and years and years. Had a
You and I played
blast.
2 matches. That was fun. We
We
played
did. We did.
the
Yep.
vampires versus cats
Yep.
twice.
If it's, if the game systems are good for quick little pickups or easy to learn or teach other people, even some other miniatures games can be a lot of fun. I know that Doug, you had been really getting into what's that, the kind of wacky wrestling game that you like the idea of playing
Rumble
between rounds.
Rumble Slam's
Slam.
amazing. Yeah, it's so
Exactly.
fun.
So like being able to bring something like that with maybe a couple of different crews so that you can teach other people how to play. If it's a quick game that's easy to learn, fantastic. And then, it's possible that you might end up having some off time during the event. If there's a buy, if you get a buy, you've got 2.5 hours ish to kill. And the choices are going to be either wander around and look lost, try and talk to people that are busy playing games, or just chit chatting with the TO team, or maybe doing some painting or some assembly. So I know that whenever I go to an event, I always bring maybe a couple of boxes that I need to get assembled, a couple of models that have some, some base coating and highlighting done, and maybe, or I'm sorry, some base coating done, and maybe I just want to get some painting in. That's always something to kind of consider. You don't need to bring like your whole setup, but just bringing a couple of models and a little case and some basic hobby supplies can be a great way to kind of kill some time, and then honestly probably get some tips from other players. Maybe get exposed to some painting or hobby techniques that you've never tried before. So what kind of stuff do you like to do in off time events aside from karaoke?
Yeah, I was gonna say karaoke constantly all the time. No, I do the same thing. I bring my EDH decks with me for exactly that reason, and I try to bring like a couple fast, easy to play games that are fast and easy to set up, like Love Letter. I don't know if you've ever played that game.
Oh yeah,
Love Letter
absolutely.
is great. It's like very minimal components, very
Mhm.
quick to play. Set it up in 5 minutes, play the game in 15 minutes, be ready for your next round type games.
Mhm.
One of my all-time favorite games that I've been bringing with me recently is Sea Salt and Paper, which
Mm.
is really fun. It's like a matching game.
Mhm.
That game's really cool. And then I've also really liked Forbidden Jungle and Quarto. Those are 2 games I've been bringing with me recently to
Nice.
events that are fast and fairly easy to play.
Yeah. I know that I have the bad habit of, and I've really tried to get away from this in the last couple of major events that I've gone to, of being like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to bring my favorite big complicated dungeon
Yeah, you
crawling board
never.
game.
That's never happening.
And then like you're like, okay, yeah, you guys want to play Big Trouble in Little China? It's going to be awesome. This game is super on theme. It's like a ton of fun, fairly well balanced. And then you're like, okay, well, it's going to take me 45 minutes to set the game up and
Yeah.
teach everybody how to play, and then like everybody could just be doing other kind of chill stuff. So I'm really trying to get away from bringing those like long form, more complex games. And I've been doing a lot more stuff like bringing things like you said, like Love Letter. When me and Brandon went to the Nova Open, he brought Splendor Duel, which was phenomenal. And he also brought regular Splendor, which we played on the train ride down there. So stuff that is, you know, a little bit strategically deep, has a little bit of complexity of rules, but not to the point that it's going to be tough to teach people. Like I'm not so much into going to big events and setting up like a very complex game. I think probably the max complexity that I've enjoyed playing recently was also at Nova, and that was terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, which I know Brandon loves. I had a blast with it. It was a lot of fun.
Is that the dice-based Terraforming Mars one?
No, it's like an expansion on regular Terraforming Mars.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the difference between all of them, but like that game was fun because it wasn't overly complex, and you can kind of like just kind of play your own game, strategize, like build your little terraforming complex, I guess
Build
you'd
your
call
little
it.
terraforming complex with
Yeah, exactly.
with your
So
space corporation.
stuff like that is what I really enjoy. But honestly, one of the things that is the most enjoyable for me is going out and eating with my friends, like going to a restaurant, going to a brewery, going out and walking the city. Those are the things that I will kind of like remember for forever and really get a lot out of. So anytime I'm going somewhere, a lot of times I'm going to do some prep work ahead of time and say like, okay, well, this brewery is a 15-minute walk. but I know exactly where it is. I've already looked at the menu. The beer looks great. The food looks great. I'm just going to see if some people want to go take a walk. Same thing with finding restaurants nearby. Like this is baller seafood place, or there's a really good looking Mexican place that's right next to where we had the Houston GT. I want to make sure we go there. Little did I know it was literally on the walk from the hotel to the game store. So that wasn't a big lift. But we did get a chance to check out some other stuff that was in the area. There was a burger place that like me, Pete, Dixon, and some other folks went to. I never would have known to go there if one of them hadn't done the legwork ahead of time. And very importantly, missed opportunity. So I did not spend a lot of time looking at places around the area in Houston. Little did I know that a mere 15 minutes from the venue is the place where all of the original Battletech pods, or they're like VR simulators almost, back from like the 90s. This company bought all of the remaining pods and
What?
takes them around to conventions. Oh yeah, like you go inside of it and it's like a mech cockpit with joysticks,
That's so sick.
and like you play basically a hacked version of MechWarrior 3 on a screen inside the cockpit. Super super dope. I didn't know it was there until I left, and now the next time I go to Houston I know that I have to go there.
Was it one of
So
those scenes from like a 90s movies where you dropped to your knees and you were like, no?
yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes,
That
oh
makes
yes,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
literally. So yeah, kind of scouting out the extracurricular activities for me is something that I always enjoy.
I think that's a
Is there
great
any?
I think
Go
it's a
ahead.
great point, honestly. Like I have to it's something that I need to do for the GT. I owe kind of the population at large a little like guide to Boston. And so one of the things I have on my like to-do list for this coming weeks as I'm prepping is putting together a where to go for beers, where to go for food, where to go for like, like other things to do.
Hmm.
Because I know there's a couple of people that are coming down with their significant others or like their like their family and stuff,
Yeah,
and they're making like a oh I haven't seen Boston yet type
yeah.
little excursion out of it. So like even calling out things like in Boston, the aquarium that's in
Hmm.
downtown that's really fun for people to go to. That's like an alternate thing you can do, and I can think of 3 or 4 breweries off the top of my head that somebody like you might want to check out, like the Sam Adams
Hmm.
Brewery. Like that might be something, for example, in Boston
Yeah,
that if you're not from the area you probably want to see. So I think that's a great
yeah,
point and something that really just can add to the overall enjoyment factor of the experience.
yeah. And especially given the time of year that your event's happening. I mean, we're talking like peak, summer season in
Yeah.
Boston. It is going to be hot, by the way, folks. If you're not aware, Boston's not the hottest city out there, but the humidity can be a real motherfucker sometimes. So make sure you dress light. But like you're not restricted like you are going to some other events like Captain Con, where it's in the winter. There is a lot of stuff that's in walking distance, but like the majority of stuff in that area of Rhode Island, you really do have to take like a short, like 5 or 10 minute drive to get there. You never know if it's going to be snowing, sleeting, raining, freezing cold. We're talking like, if we're going to the Houston event in October, or we're going to LVO because it's Vegas. I mean, or going to the Danger Planet GT in Boston, there's a lot more opportunity for a little bit of exploring in the off time. And really my perfect scenario is going to be like tournament wraps. Okay, everybody make sure you're back here for round X the next day, and immediately having a group of people that I've already kind of communicated with, and we beat feet and go out into the city, go do what we're going to do, get back in time for 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7:30, whatever it is, and then do the after hours gaming. But for me, that's going to be a real high priority, and I'm sure a lot of other people will feel the same.
Yeah, there's already people that have pinged me directly and been like, "Hey, what are
Yeah.
your restaurant recommendations?" And like
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Boston most of my life, so I have a
Yeah.
lot of them. I got a lot of thoughts, Jesse.
Yeah. So aside from minis and, side games and stuff like that, is there anything else that you really try to make sure you pack with you just to make your life easier for the couple of days that you're going to be at this major event? I know I have a few, but I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Yes, absolutely. I have a small Yu-Gi-Oh tin that I call my they're my most important widgets. It's my most important widgets box. And this Yu-Gi-Oh tin is really only like 2 inches by 4 inches, and it's intentional that it's kind of a small tin because I force myself to only put exactly what I need in that tin to play games of Malifaux. So in that tin is a 1, 2, 3, 4 inch measure widget, a 1, 2, 4, 5 inch measure widget, a blank 30 mil, a blank 40 mil, a blank 50 mil, a bunch of pyre, like 50 mil pyre, and then a bunch of whatever relevant markers there are for whatever my 3 keywords are, and then a couple of extra tarot card sleeves, like maybe 4 or 5 in case any rip, and 2 dry erase markers, and 1 small measuring tape, and that's what I bring.
Yeah.
And the reasoning for that is that when I'm setting up a game of Malifaux, like, it's always a little bit chaotic. You're always, "Oh, what does your crew do? What does your crew do?" Everybody's pulling out models, doing shit. I want to have the minimal amount of crap in front of me that I need to play the game, and I want to
Mhm.
know exactly where it is, and I don't want anything additional. So I bring that little Yu-Gi-Oh tin out, I put it right next to my stuff, and I know everything in there is exactly what I need to play,
Mhm.
and it helps me have one less thing to think about. It helps me have one less thing to have to grab out of my bag or know that is there. And I always check it the day before, so that like my shit is there. I don't have to worry about it. And that's like one of the biggest things for me personally that reduces stress and mental capacity so that when I get in front of the round, I can just focus on playing the round.
Yeah, and I think that calling out bringing extra sleeves is a big one. Bringing some extra tarot sleeves for your models is good. You definitely don't want to be using marker on your actual cards if you're concerned about being able to hold on to them for a long time. Um, Also, if you sleeve your fate deck, I think it's a really good idea to bring a handful of extra sleeves, because if one of them rips or shreds on a corner, you don't want any question of whether or not your sleeves are marked or marred in any way. That would provide an unfair advantage, because even if they don't and you have no idea what the card that's in the sleeve with the ripped corner is, nobody else knows that.
Yeah.
So if you're going to an event, you just want to avoid that possible situation. If do what you have to make sure that it doesn't happen, and that means packing 5 or so extra sleeves for whatever you have your actual fate deck in.
Yeah.
Having
I should do that
Yeah,
also. That's like
yeah,
just good advice that I should also do
yeah,
that I haven't done.
yeah. I know I used to do that all the time when I played Magic. There weren't the rainbow of different size and shape and finish and color sleeves that we have nowadays. There were black and
It was like,
black
you have
and
sleeves.
clear,
Yeah.
and there were maybe a handful of colors, and that was pretty much it. But it was still good advice then, and it is now as well.
Yeah. I think that's good
Especially
advice.
because there is such a variety of different sleeve options. If you do wreck one, there's a very small likelihood that anybody is going to have a spare one, and you're either going to have to use a different fate deck or take yours out of sleeves. And the thought of that makes me cringe. I can't play with my fate decks not in
Oh,
sleeves.
I also
It's
bring a
it's a
backup
problem.
fate deck. I forgot to
Yeah.
mention that. I bring
Oh yeah.
one backup fate deck in case something happens or I
Yep.
lose cards out of my existing
Yep.
fate deck.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there was a game at the Houston GT where one of the guys who ended up podiuming without realizing it was playing, I think, without a red Joker
Yeah,
for like a whole
he
game
was
or
playing
something like that.
Outcasts and he was playing Jack Daw and his black Joker came up a bunch with his hanged.
Yep.
But the red Joker never came up. And at the
Yep.
end of the game, they looked on the floor and his red Joker was on the floor under the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
And
So
he
having a
won the
second
game.
fate deck,
Like
I think, is
he killed
wise.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that, as much as it is important to have a tape measure for measuring things like sniper shots or long bomb shots, because you don't really want to be trying to measure 18 inches using a widget. It's like not a good
Fun.
idea. It takes
Yeah.
forever, and it's very inaccurate. But making sure that the majority of your movements, if at all possible, are done with a widget is going to speed things up a lot. And it's also going to ensure that you don't accidentally overmeasure because you don't have a good perspective on the area that your model is moving through. Sometimes I think it's called parallax error if you're trying to measure a straight distance from a diagonal
From a
viewpoint.
diagonal. Yeah.
You oftentimes end up under measuring and hurting yourself because you're not moving as far as you actually should. But it's not often that you're going to be able to get a perfect top-down view. So having widgets, I think, is very important. I know that I have my little. It's actually like a tackle box insert with all of my different widgets, like my corpse markers, scheme markers. I have more than I really need. Really, what I need to do is get a smaller one that I can condense to. That way, if I'm playing Explorer Society that doesn't use pit traps or pianos or the other 3 different types of scheme markers that I bring with me, I can just take up a little bit less space on the table. So that's on my list of stuff to do. But having something like that you can just grab and know that all of your tokens and widgets and various accoutrements are in, is a great tip. So, in addition to that stuff, I know for me, I always make sure that I have a couple of snacks with me. They go in my army case. I'm not bringing a whole separate backpack that I carry around with me all day with like drinks and water and this, that, and the other. But Doug knows, like, if I go to a tournament, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to have a bag of beef jerky or a
And
bag
spicy
of pork rinds.
Spicy pork rinds, Jinx.
Yep, spicy pork rinds. Usually, like maybe like a canned coffee beverage or an energy drink. And a lot of times I'm going to have like a protein bar or something like that. Because the times that you have to break aren't always necessarily going to be lining up with the times that you're actually hungry. And if you're trying to focus on the game and you didn't have enough water in the morning, or you really need something to eat, it sucks all the enjoyment out of it. So I always make sure that I have a couple of snacks and drinks with me that don't take up too much space. And then with me at the event, although not at every gaming table, I usually have my little, what I call my apothecary bag, which is just, hand sanitizer, a couple of Band-Aids, some, aspirin, ibuprofen, whatever type of, pain meds that you prefer, because like you're on your feet all day for 3 rounds. And then there's a lot of walking to and fro around that. Your back is going to get stiff, your shoulders are going to get stiff, your neck's going to get stiff from bending over the table. You might get a headache because the game is very thinky. And I know for me, sometimes after a really intense game, I do have a little bit of a headache. So just making sure that I have stuff on hand to deal with all that stuff and make myself more comfortable, and also be able to share with people if they're having the same kind of problems, I think is really important. And then number one most important thing is comfortable shoes. Like, I can't tell you the number of times that I go and I see people playing like a Malifaux tournament in like flip-flops, and I'm like, dude, you are not doing yourself any favors. Like, wear fucking proper shoes that you're not going to kick yourself or be unable to kick
Brandon has
yourself
this
for.
one solved. The apex
yeah.
predator of all gaming footwear is unequivocally the Croc.
That
Apex
may
predator.
contribute to all the stank in most gaming events. So I would not recommend wearing Crocs. I'm sorry, Brandon. They make they make your feet smell like vinegar, and you get all sorts of dirt and shit in between your toes because they collect everything.
But the fashion, the fashion and the functionality, come on.
There is no function. There is no fashion.
Then it's devoid
Don't wear
of
fucking
both.
Crocs. Sorry, Brandon. Don't wear fucking Crocs.
Savage. Absolutely savage.
Crocs are like the equivalent of going out to the grocery store in your pajamas.
Oh,
like,
bro. I agree. I just think, that's majestic,
Majestic.
Yeah.
Yes. Majestic. Indeed. So yeah, in terms of just packing my bags and tournament prep, I think that's pretty much all the big pointers, watch outs, and recommendations that I'd have. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Doug?
I have one other little brief quip, but I think mostly, honestly, we've covered kind of like all the stuff I wish someone had told me when I started mini wargaming, basically. I wish someone sat me down and just explained what you had explained to me about going to events. But the one other thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was know what the TNs are for key models in your crews. So if you have a master and it has a core TN with a core suit, like, be looking for that, for example. Like, look for that in your opening hand. And even if they're like mid-level TNs with specific suits. So for example, I know that I need in my Seamus crews a good amount of mid-level mask cards to get what I want for a lot of my movement abilities. So I look for 7s, 8s, 9s of masks, cards that are not necessarily high enough to win important duels, but cards that I know will meet TNs for important actions within that Seamus crew, for example. And like, it's really, really important to be aware of what those cards are across the range and spectrum of your team's abilities, so that when you go to have to cheat things for like a Shockwave simple duel, you're not throwing away a card that would be allowing a Necropunk to leap.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you need that mask for that Necropunk to leap. And that 7 or 8 of masks might be, in some cases, more important than a 10 or an 11 or a 12, because that's what's allowing the Necropunk to use leap to get into position next to a master to score, deliver a message. Right? Like, stuff like that has been so critical to my Malifaux tournament experience. and being able to identify those core cards with core suits quickly in my brain has just really done a lot of mileage for me in terms of competitive
Yeah.
play.
And, you know, a lot of that is going to come down to practice with a single keyword, which, you know, I would say in preparation for an event, if you are intending on playing a keyword and you're intending on trying to do well in the event, podium, win, whatever, you really, really want to make sure that you have at least 5, preferably 10 games in with that keyword so that you can get all that stuff locked down. Because if you go there with the best of intentions to play the best game you possibly can, and you don't have a lot of that stuff just memorized, you're going to end up disappointing yourself. And it's going to really impact your ability to enjoy the event. Like, you know, I talk about Mawtucket, like how I went back to using Mawtucket for the second half of the Nova Open. And a lot of that comes down to exactly what you just talked about. I know by heart, if I'm playing Mawtucket, I need to have on turn 1 a ram to cheat in for initiative, preferably one that'll be high enough to let me win the initiative. That way my opponent can go first and I'll get 2 pass tokens. I need a 6 or better, preferably of Rams for Ma's Horrible Hollerin'. I need a 7 or better of any suit for Little Lass's Horrible Hollerin'. Like, the list goes on. But I know, like, I need these for pit traps. I need these for Horrible Hollerins. I need these for to make Bryn really work. And those are all things that I have to get done so I can kind of structure my activations to say, okay, I need more cards, so I'm going to go with this model before I normally would so that I can draw some. And it just lets you focus on some of the other minutia that are very easy to miss because you have that stuff nailed down.
Yeah, it takes
For
mental
example,
load off of you.
takes the mental load off. Like, if you're trying to remember what you need for all your TNs and you can't remember what you need to drop a pit trap and you can't remember what you need for this movement trick, the chances of you remembering to use Scamper when your opponent cheats near you are drastically reduced. Drastically reduced.
Near zero.
Near zero, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, having a good mental lock on all that info, I think, is going to improve your game. It's going to improve your opponent's game. And it's going to reduce the likelihood that you are looking for like a take back. Like, oh, crap, I forgot that I had this front of card ability, like Butterfly Jump, on your last attack, and I didn't use it. Can I take it now, even though you're already flipping, you know, getting ready to flip cards for another attack, or you've already resolved another ability in between, or it's moved on to another activation, but you're like, well, no cards have flipped, so the game state hasn't changed. So can we go back and do this? Like, those are the kind of things that are going to impact your appearance as a good sport. They're also not really going to teach you anything because you're constantly getting to go back and fix the mistakes on things that you missed during a previous action or activation. Failing those things and seeing the cascading effect of those failures is probably the thing that's going to help you remember them the next time around.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, I think that keeping that in mind, especially at a big tournament when you're going to be playing against people you've probably never met before, maybe never even spoke to before, is very important. You want to make sure that you're putting forth your best game and your best sportsmanship, and you certainly would hope that they would do the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of where my headset is on that like topic. I think I kind of agree with everything you said there.
Sweet. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap, Doug?
No, this Pacific Punch that I'm drinking is way too sugary. I think. Yeah, it's pretty gross, but like I don't have anything else. So
serves purpose. I mean, I was going to make a coffee before I came down here, but I just didn't have time. But that's 100% what I'm going to be doing after we.
These are the trials and tribulations we go through for the internet, Jesse.
It's true. It's true. All right. Well, that's pretty much all that Doug and I have to say today. So we're looking forward to seeing anybody who is making the trek up to Boston at the Danger Planet GT. If you're on the fence, then definitely strongly consider coming. Reach out to me, reach out to Doug or anybody else involved. We're happy to give you tips, recommendations, and I can for 100% certain assure you, if you come, you will have a great time, especially visiting Boston. The last time that I had an event in Boston in the summertime was a work event where I had some folks that live in, you know, like Wisconsin and Upper New Hampshire and a few other parts of the country come into Boston. And during our off time, I basically just like took them on a walking tour of the Seaport District. And we went all the way up to the North End and hit the absolute best Italian bakery you've ever been to in your life. Had an amazing dinner.
Did you
all
go to
that can be
Mike's
yours
Pastry
and
or
more.
Modern Bakery? Did you go to one of those
We
two?
went to Modern because I think that it's better than Mike's.
Oh,
How about
oh
that?
my gosh, spicy take! Holy crap!
Spicy take. Also, the lines are always way less long, and you're not in line with people that are also trying to get ice cream at the same time.
Yeah,
So
that is true. That is true.
that
The
is
lines
very
at
true.
Modern are way shorter.
Make sure you bring cash though.
Yeah,
Cash only.
yeah, you should bring cash. Yeah,
Definitely bring cash.
yeah, that's true.
Cool. So, with all that being said, we are very much looking forward to seeing you guys in Boston. And as always, keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.